Continue now at the top of Daf Nun Hey and Aleph in Meseches Pesachim. This is Pesachim Daf 55a. The Gemara in the previous summit had a contradiction in terms of whether Tainus Tzibur is the same as Tisha B'Av when it comes to bathing or not. It was a contradiction, so Rav Papa now answers Tana Kuli Katani. It's not a contradiction because that Tana that you were quoting was only quoting the leniencies. Rashi over here explains, Kol Hani Ein Bein Chad Tana Amrinu. All of these Ein Beins that you're quoting, it was by one Tana, V'Kuli Nakat Beresh, it's just the leniencies, meaning Tana Ein Bein Tisha B'Av Kal Miyom HaKippurim. Whatever's in the Reisha, in this case Tisha B'Av, there's no situation by Tisha B'Av that is lenient in terms of Yom Kippur, L'Chatchila, in terms of L'Chatchila, Ela Shazeh Sveiko V'Chulu. The only leniency L'Chatchila is this one. V'Seifa Tana, in the end it says, Ein Tisha B'Av Kal Mi Tainus Tzibur, Ela Le'inyan Malacha. The only way that Tisha B'Av is more lenient than Tainus Tzibur is by Malacha. U'V'Chumrei Dechamer Tisha B'Av Mi Tainus Tzibur Lo Airi. The Tana is never dealing with stringencies that Tisha B'Av has over Tainus Tzibur, and of course it's possible there are stringencies like bathing. So don't make a diuk that really they're the same when it comes to bathing. It's not really true, and when it comes to bathing, Tisha B'Av is more strict than a Tainus Tzibur. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said that Talmidei Chachamim do not work on Erev Pesach, and Rav Shimon Gamliel said anyone can make himself into a Talmid Chacham. So the Gemara says, L'meimra de Rav Shimon Gamliel savar lo chayshinan liyuara, v'Rabbanan savri chayshinan liyuara. Does the Mishnah mean to say that Rav Shimon Gamliel is not worried that you're going to look arrogant, you're going to act like a Talmid Chacham and not work? He's not worried about that. And the Rabbanan, they are concerned if someone's not really a Talmid Chacham, he shouldn't act like a Talmid Chacham. It's going to be considered arrogance. V'ha'ibcha shaminan lahu. The Gemara asks, we have the exact opposite in terms of Rav Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanan's opinion on this issue. Tetnan, because we learned in the Mishnah, Chasan, when it comes to a Chasan, Im Yirtza Likros Kriya Shema Laila Harishon Kore. If the Chasan wants to read Kriya Shema on the first night, he can read. Rav Shimon Gamliel Amar Lo Kol Harotza Lito Les Hashem Yitol. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, no, if not anyone can decide that they're considered at the level where they can recite Kriya Shema on the first night that they're married. So it's the exact opposite. Over here, the Tanna Kama is saying anybody can do it. They can assume that they're able to have the proper kavana. And Rav Shimon Gamliel says, no, not anyone can assume that they can have the proper kavana. Only people who are really at that level. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yochanan says, Mochlefes Hashita. You have to switch around the Shitas. You're right, there's a contradiction. We have to switch around the Tanna Kama and Rav Shimon Gamliel. Rav Shisha B'rei Ravidi, Amar Rav Shisha B'rei Ravidi says, Lo Sipach, you don't have to switch anything around. We can answer the contradiction. The Rabbanan lo kasha. When it comes to the contradiction within the Rabbanan, it's not difficult. Hacha kevan dekuli alma avdi malacha. Here, since everyone is doing work, v'iyu lo of it, and he's not doing work, mechzike yuara. It indeed looks like arrogance. Aval Hasam over there by Kriya Shema, Kevan dekuli alma kari v'iyu nami kari. Since the whole world is reading Kriya Shema, and he who's a chasan first night, he's also reading Kriya Shema. He's doing what everyone else is doing. So lo mechzike yuara. It doesn't look like arrogance. In other words, it's true. He's doing something that a normal chasan would not have to do. A normal chasan is pater from Kriya Shema, but he's doing what everyone else is doing. It doesn't look like arrogance. That's how the Rabbanan make this distinction. The Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel lo kasha. It's not a contradiction in terms of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel either. Hasam hu deva'inan kavana, because over there by Kriya Shema there's a requirement of kavana. Va'anon sahadi de lo matzi kivunei daite. And we know that people really cannot have kavana on the first night when they're married, when they're a chasan. So mechzik yuara. So already if he's going to decide to say Kriya Shema, that looks like arrogance. Aval hacha, but over here when it comes to working on Erev Pesach, lo mechzik yuara does not look like arrogance. Amri malacha hi de lesle. People will just say this guy doesn't have any work to do anyhow. Pok chazi kama batloni ika beshuka. Go out and look. You'll see how many people are batalonim in the marketplace. There are many people who have no work to do. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, V'chachamim omrim, and the Chachamim say, B'Yehuda hayuosin malacha b'arvei Pesachim ad chatzos. In Yehuda, they would do malacha on Erev Pesach until chatzos. U'v'Galil lo hayuosin kolikar. And in Galil, they would not do any malacha at all on Erev Pesach. Halayla, what about the night? Meaning, what about the night of the 14th? Beis Shammai osrim, Beis Shammai say it's prohibited to do malacha. Uveis Hillel matir and ad honei tzachama. Beis Hillel say it's mutter until sunrise. So now the Gemara asks, Meikara tana minhaga. Originally, when the Tana of the Mishnah talks about doing work on Erev Pesach, it's all dependent on the local custom. Ulevasov tani surah, and here at the very end of the Mishnah we have Beis Shammai osrim. all of a sudden we're talking about prohibitions. What's going on? It seems a contradiction in the Mishnah whether the issue of working on Erev Pesach is an issue of minhag or it's a real prohibition. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo kash, it's not difficult. Ha Rabbi Meir, ha Rabbi Yehuda. One is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and one is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. It's a machlokas tanoim on that very issue. The Tanya we learned in a brayso. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Be Yehuda ha yuosin malacha bi'arvei Pesachim ad chatzos. In Yehuda they would do malacha on Erev Pesach until chatzos. Uve Galil ein anosin kol ikr. In Galil they would not do work at all. Amar lo Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said to Rabbi Yehuda, Ma raya Yehuda v'Galil lakan. What kind of proof are you bringing from Yehuda and Galil to this issue? Elamakom shenagu lasos malacha osin. A place where the minig is to do malacha, you do malacha. Makom shenagu shelo lasos ein osin. And if it's a place where the minig is not to do malacha, you don't do malacha. Midukama Rabbi Meir minhaga. So the Gemara says from the fact that Rabbi Meir responds to Rabbi Yehuda and says it's all dependent on minhag, michlal de Rabbi Yehuda isura ka'amar. That implies that Rabbi Yehuda says it's not totally on minhag, it's a real isser. In other words, according to Rabbi Yehuda would hold that in Galil there's a real isser to do malacha on Erev Pesach. And that's also what our mission over here is talking about. It's talking about Yehuda and Galil and Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. It's talking about where it's actually usser and where it is mutter. So the Gemara says, V'savar Rabbi Yehuda arba asr mutter basiyas malacha. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that in, let's say, the area of Yehuda, it's mutter to do work on Erev Pesach? Is that really true? We can bring you a proof that Rabbi Yehuda would not say that. V'atanya, we learned in a brayso. Rabbi Yehuda says, Haminachesh b'shlosha asr v'nekra biyado. Let's say a person is pulling out weeds on the 13th, and then he ends up taking out the actual stalk. He takes out the actual stalk of wheat, or whatever food it is, he takes it out of the ground. So shosla b'makom hatit, he should put it back in the ground in an area that's muddy. Ve'ein shosla b'makom hagrid, he should not put it back in a dry area on the 13th. Now the issue over here is, you need it to quickly take root, because if it takes root in time before the 16th of Nisan, which is the deadline for Chodesh, as long as it takes root before the deadline, so then it won't be a problem of Chodesh. It will be considered fruit of the old year, and it will be considered produce that took root before the bringing of the Omer, and you'll be able to eat it. But if you put it in the Makom Hagrid, if you put it in the dry area, it's not going to take root on time, and then it's going to be a problem of Chodesh. So the Gemara makes a diuk. B'shlosha asar in. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? He says, put it back in on the 13th. Be'arba asar lo. Apparently you can't put it back on the 14th. And the reason seems to be because you're not allowed to do malacha on the 14th. Now, there's one other possibility. The other possibility is that you shouldn't do it on the 14th because it's too late. It's not going to take root on time. But the Gemara says that's not true. Michli, let us see. Shaminan leila Rabbi Yehuda. We know that Rabbi Yehuda holds. Diyamar Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol har kava she'ena koletis l'shlosha yamim shovena koletis. If you're ever going to have a situation where you're going to graft a plant, a tree, if it doesn't take root within 3 days, it's not going to take root. It's not going to actually catch and grow properly. So the Gemara says, if it's true, if you think that Rabbi Yehuda holds you're allowed to do malacha on the 14th, why do you have to replant this item on the 13th? Plant it on the 14th, and you'll have your 3 days. That's exactly what Rabbi Yehuda says. It takes 3 days to be koletes. So you've got the 14th, the 15th, and part of the 16th, and that's going to be enough. So you see from this statement of Rabbi Yehuda that Rabbi Yehuda holds that in fact you're not allowed to do malach on the 14th. That's why you have to replant it on the 13th. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Begalil Shanu. You're right. The implication over here is that Rabbi Yehuda says malacha is prohibited on the 13th, but maybe this statement of Rabbi Yehuda, this brayso with Rabbi Yehuda was talking about in Galil, and Rabbi Yehuda admits that in Galil it's prohibited to do malacha on the 14th, but in Achinami, if you would have been in Yehuda, you would be able to replant this item on the 14th. So the Gemara says, Vayika Laila, but 1 second, what about the night? In other words, the night of even if you're in Galil, the night of the 14th you could plant it, and that should be enough time. That's your 3 days. So Amar Rav Sheisha is Beis Shammai. Rav Sheisha says no. He was following Beis Shammai's opinion that the night is also a problem. So you're in Galil where the 14th is a problem, but not only the day of the 14th, even the night of the 14th is a problem, like Beis Shammai say in our Mishnah. Rav Ashi says, Liolam ke Beis Hillel. You can even say follows Beis Hillel. Lefi she'ein darkon shel bnei adam lenachesh b'layla. It's not normal to be doing this, to be taking out the weeds in the middle of the night. The case would never happen in the middle of the night. So since it would never happen in the middle of the night, he didn't give that example. He said if it's the 13th, then you could replant it on the 13th. But enochinami, if the guy was doing this on the night of the 14th, he could replant it then. It's just not a common case. Ravina says a different answer. Leolam beYehuda. Really, Rav Yehuda is talking about in the area of Yehuda. Uvahashrasha, and when it comes to taking root, chad mixas hayom kekula amrinan. So you don't need 3 full days. One of the days can be a partial day. That we're willing to say. But trey mixas hayom kekula. But to say that 2 days are partial, so you have the 14th being a partial day, the full 15th, and the 16th being a partial day, lo amrinan. That we're not going to say. So that's why Rav Yehuda gave a case where you have to replant it by the 13th, because you have to have at least 2 full days. One of the 3 days can be a partial day, but you can't have 2 of the 3 days being partial days. And the Gemara continues at the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir says, Kol malacha shehischel ba kodem li'arba aser. Anytime a person started malacha before the 14th, gomra barba aser. He's allowed to finish it on the 14th. Avalo yaschel ba b'tchila barba aser. But the problem only is you can't start a new malacha on the 14th, aval b'shiyachol gomra, even though you'll be able to finish it all up. The Chachamim say, Gimul umanios osum malacha be'arvei Pesachim an chatzos. There are 3 professions, 3 craftsmen that actually are allowed to do malacha on Erev Pesach until chatzos. Ve'elu hein, they are as follows: hachayotin, va'asaporim, va'kofsin. Those are the tailors, the people who give the haircuts, the people who do the laundry. That's all things that are needed for Pesach. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, Af Ratzon, and it applies even to those people who are dealing with fixing up the shoes for Yontif. They also can do malacha on the 14th. Gemara says, who they asked the following question. L'tzorech hamoed tanan. When our Mishnah talks about doing malacha, is that only malacha for the purpose of the Yontif? Aval shelo l'tzorech hamoed afilu migmar nami lo. But if it's not for the Yontif, you wouldn't even be allowed to finish. Rabbi Meir said you're allowed to finish a malacha on the 14th. That was only if it's a malacha for the purpose of the holiday. Oh, Dilmor, maybe shelo l'tzorech hamoed tanan. Maybe he's talking about any malacha, even if it has nothing to do with the holiday. Aval l'tzorech, but if it would be something that is l'tzorech the moed, aschule mischalina, then you'd even be allowed to start a malacha on the 14th. Oh, Dilmor, maybe bein l'tzorech hamoed bein shelo l'tzorech. Maybe it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's for the moed or not. Migmar in aschule lo. Maybe you're allowed to finish a malacha, but you're not allowed to begin a malacha. It doesn't matter whether it's l'tzorech or not. So the Gemara says, Tashma, let's bring a proof. Avalo yaschil b'tchila barba aser. It says you shouldn't start a malacha on the 14th. Afilu tziltzal katan, afilu sifcha katana. Even if you have like a small belt, even if it's a hairnet, even a small amount of malacha, you shouldn't start on the 14th. So maya afilu, what does it mean? Even these items, you're not allowed to start. Lav afilu hani de letzorech hamoed. Doesn't it mean even these items which are letzorech hamoed migmarin eschulei lo? Even when it's something that's letzorech hamoed, you're allowed to finish, but you're not allowed to start a malacha. Mechlal de shelo letzorech, and that would imply that if it's not for the moed, migmar nami lo gamrin, and you wouldn't even be allowed to finish the malacha. So the Gemara says it's not a proof. Lo, no. Liolam de shelo letzorech migmar nami gamrin. And it could be that if it's not needed for Yontif, you still could finish a malacha. Umaya afilu, what does it mean you can even do these malachas? Meaning, you cannot even start these malachas. Afilu hani nami de zutri ninu. Even these things which are such small malachas. You might have thought that beginning a malacha, that's such a small project, it's already the finishing anyway. There's no difference between starting from scratch or finishing it because it's so short. So I might have thought you can even start these malachas on the 14th. That's why the Brisa says, Kamash Malan, that's why the Brisa says, don't start malacha on the 14th, even if it's a very small project. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots, Tashma, come in here. Rabbi Meir says, Kal malacha shehi letzorech hamoed, any malacha that is letzorech hamoed, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis.